Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Build the Weight Loss Practice of Your Dreams. I have a treat in store for you today. It is a good friend of mine, Lindsay Satterfield, and I'm going to let her share with you information about something that I get asked about all the time when I'm doing site visits or when I'm just consulting with a practice. And that really is how to empower your team to be at their utmost productivity, and also kind of weaving that in as you're doing your hiring practices and just building your whole team in general, especially when you're building a practice from the ground up or when you're going through a bit of transition. So Lindsay Satterfield is with Satterfield & Company, and she does some great work around this very topic. And I'm going to let her, with her level of enthusiasm and all of her expertise, share a bit about how her company came to be and share with us a little bit about her passion and how she helps corporations and individuals alike.
Great. Thank you so much, Carol. And it's just a thrill to be able to speak to your audience. And as Carol said, I am a productivity trainer and coach, and I've had my own business for 14 years. And, I want to tell a little bit of a story about my journey, since I know that we're all on some kind of business journey, and it's never a straight line. I started, as I said, 14 years ago, and I just decided that I wanted to have more control over my work and life and time and just what I was putting out into the world. And so one of the things that I'm super passionate about that I think you'll see is helping people get control over what they're accomplishing in their life, really living more intentionally. And I was seeing in the workplace that people were overwhelmed. And I was, just in the course of the various jobs I've had, my background is in leadership development and training. And I was seeing that if I could help someone with some tools or approach, if they could feel like they were getting some control, the relief that went off in their eyes was so satisfying to me. And a lot of my clients over the years have been in international development. And what I saw was, if I can help someone manage what they're up to, it's their own little world peace, right? Their own little world peace, one desk at a time. So for a long time, that was my tagline. It isn't anymore. But so anyhow, I have been working in businesses and organizations over the years. And really my philosophy of business was by referral. Like, I just wanted to get everything by referral. And to be honest, that actually worked for many, many years, really up until about 3 or 4 years ago, when what had started to happen in my business is I was getting very deep in a few large organizations and businesses. And at the same time, funny how that is, all of them went through huge restructuring. And so they weren't really having the trainings and coaching and things that they were hiring me for as much. And so that really affected my business in a really challenging way. And it was a fantastic wake-up call, because what I saw was I was coasting in my business. I was just letting it all show up at my door, and not really taking the reins of my own business and intentionally directing it in the marketplace. Mm-hmm. And so from that, I've shifted some of my business. I wouldn't say shifted it as much as expanded it to different B2B markets, but also to, or in industries, but also to the B2C, directly to customers, which has meant that I've had to learn a ton of things, like, how to create online courses and social media, and a lot of things that I just wasn't doing before. So right. It's been a great, a great journey, a great trip. And, you come to see that it's these challenges that actually up-level your game a lot of times.
Right. It's funny how a challenge will will really can kind of get us jazzed again, you know?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
health,
You
yeah,
remember, you're back into,
right.
why am I doing this?
Exactly, kind of remembering your purpose and your passion. So,
Yeah,
and in healthcare, I think, we're under so much of a change, and our audience are, lots of different people in different, it could be a private practice, it could be a large health system, it could be an individual, who's, really working, kind of doing everything themselves. And there's so much change around that. And one of the biggest issues is that I know for a corporation, no matter what business, your people are your ambassadors, and your
yes.
people are those that create your reputation, and they can really make or break your practice. And a big frustration is around how do we empower them to not only have that customer service, that's a huge piece of it, but also to be productive, because we don't have huge budgets. Staffing is one of the largest line items on our budget, and productivity is really important. And particularly in smaller practices, they have to cross over a lot of different roles. And even in large health systems, you don't want them to get lost. You want them to really enjoy their job and embrace it and be productive. So
Mhm.
what are your top tips that you can share with us today about how to make that happen if you're the leader for a group
Yeah.
of individuals that are in those positions?
Yeah, I love this question because it's really the heart of us doing work, right? Is how do we do it through people? There's very few enterprises that it's totally just you against the world.
Right.
It's you with a group of people serving others. So one of the things that I'd say that I think is a sort of a pitfall that leads into what are some tips is, as a leader, oftentimes we sort of progress in our career because of our competence in a particular technical area, whether you're a physician, whether you're a leader of a practice, you have it all organized, or however that works. We move forward because of our competence. And when we get more responsibility and are starting to be responsible for teams rather than just our own expertise, our own work,
Hmm.
we sometimes forget that really where our attention needs to go is to shift, and that is to shift to people, because our work is getting accomplished through people. And I notice that a lot of times we just not even consciously, but what happens is we start working with people as a means to an end. These people are going to help me get this thing, but we only stay focused on the thing, right? And
Right.
so sometimes miss the cues and clues, and the opportunities to really up level performance in a profound way through people, because there's no question about it. A group of people working cohesively together versus a group of individuals working together are going to outperform any day of the week, and are going to create efficiencies for your practice or your business that can't be done just through systems. So to that end, that means that not only are you an expert in sort of the content of your work, but you have to start to become an expert in people and what motivates people. How do people perform at their best? So for our purposes here, one idea that I'd like to introduce is understanding where motivation comes from.
Hmm.
And, there's a lot out there about don't wait for motivation, and motivation is bad. And, like just sort of a poo-pooing motivation. And the truth of the matter is motivation is a neurochemical process. There are hormones related to motivation. The trick is that we don't wait for motivation in order to act. We have ways that we can act in order to trigger motivation. And that becomes sort of this virtuous cycle of productivity when we do that, when we take into our own hands what are the things I can do to increase my own motivation. So just to simplify it, there are two real big drivers of motivation, and they are meaning and control. Meaning
Hmm.
and control. And all of us can test this out in our own life. When we feel like we are not connected to anything that's meaningful to us and we don't really care about it, and if we feel like we don't have any control over what's happening, our motivation starts to sag. And, you can see this, I'm sure, in, look around to your staff and see where you've noticed a lack of motivation. The question is, are they connected to any meaning in your practice, in your organization, or are they feeling out of control, like they don't have any control?
Right.
So there's a few, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, because you talk about that, I mean, it extrapolates personally and then to your team.
Right.
And trying to figure out how to understand the motivation for your team.
Yes.
Is tricky at best.
Yeah. So, just from okay, so that's great information. How do we act on that? So,
but I have to say, for practices like the ones that are in our audience, most of them.
Yeah.
What I've found over the course of many, many years is the meaning comes from, for many of them, their passion for helping people. So seeing patient outcomes and losing weight and just seeing how their life transformed just makes you get jazzed to come in during the day.
Yes.
And to work. And the other thing that I've seen as a big driver is their motivation to help further the business, particularly their immediate supervisor. And in small practices, kind of it becomes a little family. And in larger practices, it's all about, sort of a meaning for helping further the purpose of the business. So at least that's what you want. But I've seen that, and it's a joy when you see it occurring. But anyhow, I digress there. I was going to
it's right on target. It's exactly what I was going to say. And we can always dig up meaning. If we pay attention to it, we can go, oh yeah, this is meaningful because of this, this, and this. But we get so distracted by all the stuff we've got to do that sometimes we lose connection to that. And really, sort of my practical tip for this is don't lose connection to that, and find practical ways and deliberate ways to constantly articulate that purpose. In fact, I was reading about a famous restaurateur who became known for him using these little short phrases that connected to the meaning that he was constantly talking about to his staff, constantly talking about daily. And he would have these little short phrases that they all got into saying because they became like a little capsule of this kind of purpose. So my suggestion would be really get clear about what is the purpose here. And there's so many great uplifting meaning and purpose in the kind of work of your audience of in terms of people's health and well-being and life that they can live. So there's that. There is the fact that they're employing people and providing the opportunity for people to have, support their families and pay their bills and all of those things. That's a valid, meaningful effort, So if you can constantly in your team meetings, constantly be reinforcing this, and then it's great to really ask people to identify what their meaning is and how that sort of dovetails into this bigger meaning. Because also you want to use this meaning almost as a filter, right? Mm-hmm. So that's how you can see cultural fit in an organization, is if the organization is clearly up to things I don't care about, there's going to be more friction. It's going to be harder for me to connect to my motivation to do this work. So by making it front and center, you don't make it such an assumed thing, why don't they get that they should be motivated about this great thing we're doing? We're making it explicit, almost like a team practice.
Right. I love that. That. And I do think meaning is so important. And I love that you brought up the fact that you don't need to guess. I mean, you can ask them, Yes. I think a lot of times your team feels honored by the fact that you care, that you're even bothering to ask them what brings them meaning and joy into their role.
Exactly.
And participating in the business. I love that.
It's so important there's the expression culture eats strategy for breakfast. And that really gets at this idea that you can have the great product mix, service mix, great goals, but if the culture isn't isn't conducive to high performance, it actually doesn't matter. It'll eat it for breakfast. So that's why you really want to attend to these things with your team, that they are aligned with what gives them meaning in the practice.
Right.
So there's that. The other piece of the motivational cocktail or trigger cocktail is control. And this is really important. Oh, I want to back up on the meaning. Another thing you can do is look at, look at your big goals for the practice or business, and and then ask yourself, why is that important? That's the meaning piece, right? Sometimes we just make the goal of the meaning. The goal isn't the meaning. That's the what. We want to know the why behind the what. And the other thing that I wanted to mention is looking at each role and how that role actually supports that why. So if it's your person who's answering the phones, that supports this, this potential client feeling or patient client feeling really good about the experience, So really making those connections explicit. And that leads into the control piece. You want to look at each role and make sure that each role has areas in which they are in control of, that they can make decisions about. Because if it's just, you just tell me what to do and I just do it, it's not going to have the motivational juice that you're going to need in a small business or a small practice, or even a large business or large practice. So you want to make sure that for each role, and it's not that you just sort of give away power and say, do whatever you want. You want to give the kind of guidance and training where you're saying, these are the principles for what's important. And again, if they're really connected to the bigger picture of the practice, they're going to be able to also be aligned with that. But once you feel confident that this person has the tools they need to make these decisions in this particular area, you let them go do it. So for example, this is a really simple example. Let's say somebody is, responsible for events that you might put on in the office. I don't know, maybe new patient events, or I don't know what types of events, but let's just say
support groups and things like that.
Yeah. So if every time you say, and make sure you use XYZ caterer, or make sure you get the food from this particular place, or make sure this is the food, maybe you could give that power over to the person planning the event. And the guidance is that, we want it congruent with our purpose here. So we're probably, maybe not going to have hamburgers and fries or whatever,
Yeah.
So that person within that scope and aspect of their job, they can make those choices so that they start feeling control in their work. The minute people start feeling out of control, then they start losing motivation. Just one more thing around control, because there's, we could go on forever on all these topics, but overwhelm is real, right? Overwhelm is real, and that's a big trigger for feeling out of control. So another thing in your business or practice is looking at, let's keep our goals really targeted. So we're not constantly talking about all the 100 million things that we're doing, but we are all clear in the direction we're going, and it's fairly targeted. Even if you have to focus on, one or two things for the next 2 months, and then you add in another thing and then add in another thing, so that there isn't so much sort of lack of clarity, and in that lack, a sense of overwhelm and lack of control.
Right. That really is a big one, is overwhelm. You've got these people coming at your window, and you got all these tasks you need to get done, and you're trying to, I'm really glad that you touched on that. And you and I are both, I think some of our personality tendencies happen to be a little bit controlling. I've had to really, maybe I'm surmising that, but I've had to really work at that. And I have, on nearly every single occasion, been pleasantly surprised and almost kicked myself for not having given up some control prior to that time. And
Right.
because it's amazing, other people come up with better ideas than you might.
Yeah,
So, uh,
exactly. Exactly. And then their own engagement is worth so much because they're
right.
willing, they're really eager when they have some way of making a contribution to something that's meaningful rather than just being told. You get more adult behavior.
Right.
When you're just telling someone to do, that's a little patronizing, right?
Yeah.
So you want to look at now the reason that we might be of a similar type that way, is a valid reason. Sometimes it's like you want some sense of quality and you have a vision.
hmm
The trick is, it is at the front end easier to just tell people what to do. Over the long run, it will drain you. It will absolutely drain you, and there won't be enough hours in a day. So a better investment at the front end is uncovering your own thinking about things. Like,
Right.
what is your vision? How do you see things as it relates to this particular task or part of the business? And then you can work with a person. So again, I'm not saying take an untrained person and just good luck,
Yeah.
but step by step, start giving them more decision making capability. And, they're going to tell you what they decided or whatever. You certainly have the veto power, but use it judiciously so that people can feel a sense of contribution and meaning in your
Right.
business.
Right. Can you share a little bit more? I want to kind of hone in a little bit more about as you're working with corporations and that sort of thing. What do you see is working really well right now in terms of hiring and empowering a productive team?
Yes.
And how do you see that changing for the future?
Well, I see that, there's become a lot more attention, I think, through error on cultural fit.
Mhm.
That this thing called culture, and really culture is a sense of belonging. Humans have a deep need to belong. And you want to create a culture that has that kind of sense of trust in it.
Mhm.
Now, what I've seen is a lot of people hire for skills only, for knowledge and skills. That's
Right.
great. And they have a beautiful resume. They might be the smartest person in the class. They might have done all the right things. And then you hire them, you're so excited, and you're like, oh my gosh, what happened? Because the cultural fit wasn't there. So I
Right.
think you want to look at what what is important for this work culture to be effective. A
Mhm.
really simple one is kindness, right? Kindness. Um, you get a really smart person who's going to boss everyone around, and maybe not treat your customers and clients and patients the way you want. And it really doesn't matter how smart they are, right?
Mhm.
Um, I think I was listening to a Gary Vanderchuk video where he's like, I could have the smartest person. If I start hearing that they're a problem, I don't care. They're gone. So there's value, I think, in really, not doing that at the back end, but at the front end. And
Right.
looking at, some organizations use assessment tools to really get at sort of personality mixes. So it's not
Mhm.
personal. It's not, sometimes you just want to fill out a team, you need more sort of, logically focused people, or
Right.
you need more people with social sensitivity and social intelligence. That would be the other thing that I would say is really critical for a business or organization. And what I see in the organizations I work with that are really thriving, they
Mhm.
emphasize social intelligence and social sensitivity.
Sure.
One of the Google did a multi-year study called the Aristotle Project on what creates an excellent team, a high-performing team. And they looked at, because they're the data people, they looked at every which way. Is it the leader? Is it the composition of the people? Is it the intelligence? Is it the this? No, 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 no. What they found was two things that made a difference. And they actually
Mhm.
did an external study as well, not just internally to Google. And it was social sensitivity and equal voice. And this kind of goes in with what we've been talking about so far. So equal voice is not equal vote, but it means that you hear from people in equal measure. No one dominates or withdraws. So that's a
Right.
level of participation. That's obviously a place of belonging. And then the other one, social sensitivity, people that can read others' emotions and moods and all of that. We need
Mhm.
that in order to be of service to both our clients and to each other on teams. So
Right.
anyway, that's what I would be looking at. I'd be looking much more at the cultural fit and the social sensitivity, the social intelligence of the
Right.
person.
Right. I've actually found it
Even
really.
given that they have the prerequisites and the requirements of
Sure,
yeah,
sure. I've always, I mean, I think I put it in all my books and when I'm out talking, but I always believe, depending on, unless it's a really specialized role, that given the right personality, you can almost teach them any skill, the
yes,
person, and so that really helps. I think I've personally found that helpful.
yeah,
I've also found it helpful to have someone or a couple representatives from the team that they would be working with
yes,
participate in the interview process.
yeah,
From
really
a
important. And again, doing that builds that ownership, builds that sense of
Yeah,
control, builds that sense of meaning. So it kind of works on all the different levels. And
right.
you get these different perspectives. And, you and I were talking a little bit before we started about when we're talking about culture, we're not talking about uniformity of personality at all. We're talking about alignment with values, the same values. So if you're a training company and you don't believe in training and you think it's a big joke, you being in this organization isn't helping much, even if you have
Right.
all the skills in the world, all the sort of technical skills.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
because it actually ends up being a bit boring if you have a totally homogenous
Of,
team.
yeah.
I mean, that diversity is totally important. And then, like you say, it's a matter of figuring out that motivation and how to then,
Yeah.
integrate that into their role. So I
Yeah,
love
so
what
I
you've
think
said so
all
far.
of these things really go back to as the leader being crystal clear about what you're up to, what you're about, and the kind of culture that you want to create, both for your customers, clients, patients, and for your team. So not
Hmm.
the team isn't an afterthought, they are what's creating it.
Right, right. I love that. Um, if you were, I was going to ask you, I know we're running a little bit tight on time, but if you were out there talking or consulting with someone who's starting a practice and they're just getting going and they're like, oh, hate hiring. I just want, but I want a great team. I need to build that aspect. I know it's important. What advice would you give them for building that team? I know some of it you've already,
Yeah, I mean,
shared with
it's
us, but,
mostly, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would start looking at where is your first opportunity that you can offload some of your work
mhm,
that's going to be the easiest for you to, sort of ramp up to do it. So, that's a certain kind of prioritization of roles. But then really what I've talked about of being, in the interview process, being sometimes we get a little desperate, we need help, how can I ask, really ask the right questions that will get at cultural fit and that will get a sense of the person's social intelligence. That's really, I mean, that to me, that is the most important. And in that process, you can start the process of motivation right in the interview process by really getting in touch, asking them what's important to them, getting some good questions that are going to get at the why, not just the what that they want to do. And a
right.
great way to get at that is to keep asking why, because people have sort of pat answers. What I find really helpful is they'll give you that answer and say, well, why is that important? Tell me more about that. So to really dig in and get to know the people that potentially are you're going to spend a lot of time with and are really the most critical thing to your business at this point.
Right. That's so true. It's so true. Yeah, that why that's a great thing. Even, was one of your favorite positions you've ever held, and why? I guess that would link
Yeah.
to their
And then
motivation
you say,
too.
oh, I did this, and then I did this and this and this. And then you say, well, why did you like that? Like, why is that
Right.
important to you? And,
Yeah.
you find, and they might even have a cool answer, but if you ask them why again, they may get at something even more core that's more relevant to your business.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's great advice. Wow.
And
We've
then
covered.
you've already started the onboarding. Like if this person
Yeah.
ends up being someone that's a great fit for your organization, for your practice, then you've already sown the seeds and shown them the kind of organization that you are in terms of the culture.
Right, right. And I know some of our listeners may not like this, but I actually like to include the physician during part of that interview process, even though
Yes.
they really like, oh, I don't have time.
Yes.
For someone that you've vetted, obviously you don't run everyone by them, but for somebody you've vetted and really is going to have a key role, I think that they find it a little nerve-wracking,
Yeah.
the person, but they're also honored by the fact that this physician cares enough about me and my position to have a conversation with me. And then it gives the physician an opportunity to share their vision, and really
Absolutely.
sort of drive home what that. I think that's something that I've found to be really helpful as well, even though a lot of people don't feel like they have the time for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just like what we've been talking about. You may not have the time, may not feel like you have the time for it in the moment, but the investment, what it says to people about their value, about what's important, is sort of priceless. It's like an investment that will return so much, because again, it's saying from the physician's point of view, I recognize that the people make or break the practice, and they
Mhm.
really do.
Yeah.
If you don't have everyone like going in the same direction, or that the physician only meets with certain positions,
Right.
with candidates for certain positions, I think really makes a difference from that cultural point of view, from that meaning point of view, um, that that it becomes a priority because people really, the team should be a priority. As I said, there may be a managerial like leader of the practice, but the physician, it's that person, it's his or her vision, right, of how they want to serve the community, so through whatever that you're doing, so
Right.
you don't want that to be external to this process.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Gosh, I have a whole nother topic for I'll have to spring on you later for another podcast. It just
I'm
came to mind.
excited.
Yeah.
I know
Um,
I could talk about this. I mean, it's hard for me to not da, da, da.
I know. I love your passion for it. And I love what you do with corporations. So at this point, I know we're getting short on time. Can you tell us just an inspirational thought that you may have, and then a little bit about how people can learn more about Lindsay Satterfield and what it is that you do?
Yes, absolutely. I like to position productivity as power. It's really understanding how to exert your power in the most positive way, because I find that so much of the messages kind of in the culture at large are very victim oriented. We have no control, we have no power. But so I'm always using as a litmus test, how can I get back in the power seat in this situation? So a lot of things happen in life we have no control over, but we can always place ourselves in the power seat for the most impact. So that's really what,
Oh,
when I'm working with people, sort of ultimately what we're after. And that goes to this idea of giving consent to what you're doing, not just complying with what you're doing. So I love this idea is I give consent to showing up at work and doing this kind of thing. And not all of it's fun, but I'm giving it my consent. I'm not just complying with it. You'll find it
right.
really changes your perspective and outlook and actually makes things a lot easier and more efficient. So
I can
that's my
imagine.
parting word. And yeah, people can get in touch with me through my website at lindsaysatterfield.com, and that's Lindsay with an AY.
Mhm.
And I'm also on different social media channels on LinkedIn, a Facebook group called Productivity Power, where I give lots of tips about productivity, and also on Instagram under my name, Lindsay Satterfield. So yeah, reach out. I'd love to chat with whoever.
Right. I know I'm a part of
Questions?
your Productivity Power Facebook group. Yeah, good stuff in
Yes,
there. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and yeah, we have a Facebook group as well. So that's open to all.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Gosh, well, I really, really appreciate your time. And I'm going to give a teaser for our next podcast. But it's all about, so a lot of times I'll go into practices. And so there's this overwhelm that we were talking about.
Yeah.
And a lot of times the answer is we just need more people. We need more people.
Right.
And
Right.
so, but yet I'll look and I'll be like, wow, they've got a lot of staff for the number of physicians that they're supporting or for the services that they have or whatnot. And so to me,
Right.
I'm like going in with the thought of like, wow, I wonder how we can maximize use of all these people. And they're like, we need
Right.
more people. So a matter of going through an exercise about how you can take the people that you have and maybe help even that out versus always thinking your first response is, I need more
It's
people.
just to throw people at it. It's like throwing
Yeah,
money at a problem, right? We know
yeah,
that doesn't always work. It feels
yeah.
expedient in the moment, but it's really, I don't mean to be commenting on your next thing, but it really is like putting it's not dealing with the ultimate cause.
Yes,
It's dealing with the
yes.
symptom. It's just like
That
taking
is
an aspirin.
right. I know.
The
I
headache
love
is
that.
still there.
Because a lot of times it's amazing when you can get into the meat of the problem. So
Yeah,
talking about some strategies for that will be an exciting next podcast with you. So
cool.
we'll have to just put that teaser out there and get that on the books. So I
Yeah,
really want to thank you for your time. I know you're a busy person, and it means so much to me that you took time out of your schedule to share with me and my audience. And until our next episode, everybody, go out there, keep doing all the awesome things you're doing to improve the health of your community. Reach out to me as well if you have any other topics or things that you want me to cover. Carol, Karol, at weightlosspracticebuilder.com. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast yet, better get right on that. We've got new stuff coming out every single week. So everybody have a great day. Lindsay, thank you again.
Thank you so much. It was great.
All right, take care.
Bye.
Bye.